I'm talking with Jonny and Colin Greenwood, Radiohead. Welcome to Morning Becomes Eclectic.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the record. Kid A just came out in America, and there's a lot of stuff about the record in the press. A lot of interviews that I've read have all pretty much been the same, and they've all focused on the same thing. I'd like to perhaps go in a little bit of a different direction and, perhaps talk a little bit more about the experimentation that is on this record and how you guys came to the record in this way. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened when you first decided the time was right to go back into the studio and do another record?
I'm not sure what was that different from the last time. It was the same combination of bringing in our favourite records and trying to emulate parts of them and sound like, other kinds of music that we like and admire. We're very bad at setting, manifestos about what we're going to do and what we're going to change. Just we drift along, really, don't we?
Yeah, it always amazes me that we manage to do these records and then play them live and conduct some kind of tour around the music, because there's no kind of blueprint for the next 2.5 years of our life when we go in and make a record of where we want to go for that period in the future. But much of it is also to do with, like, the last record was about all the things that we, the negative experiences that we had with the last album, and the touring and the promotional side to it, and that as much informed what we didn't want to do, what we wanted to do with the new record as much as the different sounds we were listening to.
I read somewhere that Ed O'Brien said if you'd had to make another record like OK Computer, you probably just wouldn't have made another record.
And if we had made that record and it had the same reviews as OK Computer had when it came out, then we'd probably have ground to a halt and split up as well. So that's true.
The new record, I guess it breaks a little bit from that traditional acoustic, electric framework, in so much as there's a lot more experimentation.
Right.
Challenges our preconceptions of what a rock group would play.
Yeah.
What kind of a record a rock group would make.
Yeah. It's strange to be classed as a guitar band when guitars are just, one of the things that we play and use. I mean, like, I really love playing glockenspiel and stuff on stage. That's really fun. That's as much fun as playing guitar for me. So.
But it's a very embarrassing instrument to bring.
Very embarrassing of course.
And you don't actually bring it out yourself, do you?
No, that's true.
You're happy to walk on stage with a guitar,
and play
like
the thing. Yeah.
Keith Richards style, strapped around your back, but you're not happy carrying a glockenspiel out there.
I've actually seen you with some weird and wonderful things up there on stage, but not actually a glockenspiel yet.
No.
Is it true to say that perhaps in the process of making this record you discovered that you didn't all have to play the instruments that you traditionally would play or are expected to play?
You hear stories about bands that just, will go and record a drum kit, and then the guitar player will play a guitar part and the bass player will go and play a bass part. And none of us are that attached to our roles, I don't think.
It's like a closed shop, isn't it? It's like kind of union practices that you're critical of when you come to New York and do some of the, TV shows, and some guy's being paid $500 to move a ride cymbal and stuff, and and it's like, and you find yourself like falling into the same patterns as well. So that's true. And we were big Talking Heads fans, and the way that I think they sort of approached the instruments, I think.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, on stuff like Remain in Light, who's playing what, and does it really matter? The overall sound is amazing.
Can you remember which song from the new album first crystallized as a song, or maybe when you were sequencing the record, which song you first knew was going to be on the record in a particular place?
I think the song Everything in Its Right Place was important because, unlike with OK Computer, our last record, we were happy to leave parts of it empty. I think in the past we've been too scared to leave sounds exposed and also have too much space around them, and we've been guilty of layering on top of what's a very good song or a very good sound, and hiding it, camouflaging it in case it's not good enough. And Everything in Its Right Place is one of the first songs that we've actually realised is great, even though it's so sparse. So that was a very important song, and it also dictated how we sequenced the record, because we knew it had to be the first song and everything just followed after it.
So maybe we'll take a listen to Everything in Its Right Place on Morning Becomes Eclectic. So once again, we're talking with Jonny and Colin Greenwood of Radiohead. And, I guess we've all been impacted by electronic music and DJ culture in recent years, in England especially, but also here in the States in the last couple of years. And Kid A as an album seems to have taken elements of electronic music and fused or blended them with more traditional rock music. We were talking a little earlier on about when you went into the studio, there was no manifesto. But was there some sense that there was going to be an introduction of other music that you'd been listening to? You alluded to the fact that you had been listening to some other music and wanted to bring that to the sessions.
Partly it's a realisation that there are only a handful of good rock records in a way, and in the same way there's only a handful of...
There's a handful of good any records.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the realisation.
And we're equally passionate about all of them. you know, from you know, big band stuff like Charlie Mingus to you know, to electronic and whatever. It's when it's good, it's just, you know, it's breathtaking, and sounding like a rock band would just mean we were only really listening to music like that when the Pixies were around, and since then it's just been.
But you're a big Led Zeppelin Floyd fan as well, Jonny, aren't you?
The Zepp and the Floyd.
There's the occasional Zepp jam in the studio with Nigel, the producer. And stuff.
Actually, our producer is more of a Zepp fan.
He's more of a rock producer.
Yeah, he likes to run out and play
Yeah,
guitar solos
yeah.
when I was looking.
But then he also did Everything in Its Right Place with Tom on the computer, you know, using it in a really cool way.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about Nigel a little bit. Nigel Godrich, who produced OK Computer and Kid A. How much did he bring to the sessions, and how he helped guide you, perhaps?
Right.
Or the producer's role obviously varies on the producer and on the band, but I would
Right.
imagine that he's somebody who really brings something to the table.
He is, yeah, he's vitally important. I mean, he's a mixture of energy and you know, sense of taste and enthusiasm, and also the fact that he does everything himself. You know, from setting up microphones to discussing song structures, and he feels like part of the band when we're working. Definitely, you know, we're all the same age, we're all together, we're all kind of doing this thing for the first time together. You know, working in isolation, and it's a great way to work.
He didn't think much of Everything in Its Right Place when he heard it, and he didn't think it was going to be any good. But then Tom was banging it out on an upright piano, you know, and then he and Tom like stayed up late one night in this big country house we rented out in England, and did it on a Prophet keyboard, and then Nigel like used a scrubbing tool and Pro Tools to like scratch the sound waves and made all of these mad sounds that no one had done before. And it was amazing, you know. He was very good for us, as when everything ground to a halt, Nigel would get us all into the live room of the studio that we were in, wherever we were, and make us carry on.
Well, there were times, I believe, when you were making the record that perhaps you did want to go away for a while and not carry on for a while. Was there any particular song that you were working on that might have gotten you to a point where you were like, where do we go from here? Was there any particular moment as you were in the studio? Because I know you recorded in a couple of different places, right?
Right.
Yeah, we recorded in Paris and Copenhagen and Gloucestershire. And
then you finished in your own studio?
Yeah.
Right.
As to, you know, the stressful side of recording it, a lot of it was about what was going to happen. You know, the big fear is it's easy to go and record, but it's very difficult to envisage what's going to be released and end up in a CD case in a record shop. And so that's really the problem. There's no problem with all hanging out and eating beautiful food every day and making music and working on computers and playing guitars, but it's a big problem thinking about editing and compiling and presenting.
And what happens at the end of that process, and what you do with...
Especially as the previous time, if you've done it with OK Computer, and you end up becoming thoroughly disillusioned, disenchanted, and sort of tired out and burnt out by the whole process, and feel that you're on this fast track to playing the Continental Airlines Arena outside New York, only this time you won't be opening for Alanis Morissette, you'll be doing it yourself, but you'll be throwing all the same moves, you know.
Right.
So, you know, it's a bit like we all went to the same school, which was a boys' school just outside Oxford, and, you know, there would be like their sort of election to become the prefects, and it's a bit of a feeling like, hang on a second, we all left school and then we went to college and then we were in a band because we wanted to do it because of the things we didn't like about school, and we're ending up sort of going on to the way of being like prefects in the sixth form in the version of our of what we do, you know, and it's like, that's not right. So, you know, a lot of this 2-year period was trying to sort of put the brakes on that.
Is that a particularly English thing, do you think?
I think it's a Protestant middle class thing, I think, yes. I
mean, for me, growing up in England as well, I mean, it sounds like a particularly British way of growing up, first of all, and secondly, then reacting to that.
Completely, yeah. I'm reacting against it. I mean, punk rock, yeah, completely.
I'm wondering if the song "The National Anthem" has anything to do with that way of looking at the world from that British perspective.
It was basically written around a very old song, a bass line from about 10 years ago.
Tom demoed the song on the 4-track when we were all at school when he was about 16 or 17.
Oh my gosh.
So around like a Boss Dr. Rhythm drum machine and a sort of guitar fuzz bass line. And then we were finishing the touring in OK Computer in the winter of '97, and we had to record some B-sides for the last single releases of OK Computer, and everyone jumped in the bus to go to London to do, and I didn't go because I was like, for various reasons, and they cut National Anthem and decided it was too good to use as a B-side for OK Computer singles, so it sat on a shelf for another 2 years. And then Jonny added all this amazing stuff with the Ondes Martineau and found sounds on the radio station, including the orchestra at the end, which is where the National Anthem title comes from, because it sounds like, so it wasn't originally called National Anthem, it's called Everyone.
Seems a good opportunity for me to play the song. It's the national anthem on When It Becomes Eclectic by Radiohead. I'm Nic Harcourt, and once again we're talking with Jonny and Colin Greenwood from Radiohead. It seems that there's been a big difference between American and British reactions to the records. I can't believe that you take that much notice of what the press says, but you obviously must hear about it. And in England, of course, they're always ready to take a look at a band at a certain point in their career and say, oh, well, what are they showing us now? And that, I believe, has been the general reaction in England. But in America, and this has actually surprised me, that the expectations here, or perhaps expectation is not the right word, but the anticipation of this record has been accompanied by an open mind. The press here seems to have really, they want to embrace this record. And I don't know if you're aware of that, but they definitely, America seems ready for this record.
I think you're right, yes.
The reaction in the UK has been strangely conservative in a way. Complaints about, lack of melody and, really quite surreal. They've reviewed it like a Travis record or something, in that they wanted to sound...
They want a Travis record.
In a way, yeah, in a way. It's quite bizarre.
And there's nothing wrong with a Travis record.
Which would be fine.
Everyone wants
that's
a Travis
Travis,
record,
right?
Yeah.
5 times platinum or whatever. I mean, it's great. I think the press that we've had in the UK, I thought, was entirely predictable, because I think a lot of what the journalists were writing about was very much where our heads were at about 18 months ago when we started this recording project, It was like the fear of trying different things, and also sort of clinging on to old things, and the expectations of continuing the guitar thing from the Benz and OK Computer. And once you become recognised and better known, you also become expected to do certain things. So I found the press entirely predictable in England. The fact that people were going, I don't understand, what is this, what's going on? Because it wasn't like these journalists had spent 18 months with us in a studio going through the process. They had 48 hours to listen to the record, and if I was them, I'd probably have to give the same kind of verdict as well. But what you were saying about America, and that is interesting.
Well, let me just come back on the point on the English thing. I mean, do you think perhaps if they'd been really listening to what was going on in the Benz and OK Computer, that they would have had a different reaction? I mean, because it seems to me a logical progression for Radiohead to actually make this kind of a record. So I don't quite understand why they're surprised, and I'm wondering if that surprises you.
But I think it's because if you're a successful band, then you become perceived as successful, and you are perceived as having all the trappings of success, which is I suppose the 3 nights sold out in Wembley Arena, and the video with the latest video director who does the latest drinks adverts, and and you've got the tie-ins with the hottest new independent movie director who's got whatever, but
the whole cross promotional
exactly
angle.
And if you're not doing that, but you're at the point in your career where you can do that, then a lot of questions are asked in the media as to why you're not doing it, and you could be seen as being perverse and bloody-minded and cack-handed. We've had some very bad reviews of people who think that we're trying to rip off people like Aphex Twin or Warp Records artists, and completely missing the point about what we're doing, which is we're just playing each other our records and carrying on songwriting.
Right. Let's talk about the American reaction.
Well, we've been joking about doing this interview and a couple of other ones about sort of leaning back in the chair and saying, well, we've always...
Oh, that tiresome... Yeah, it's the big cliche, isn't it? When the band, it starts by doing an interview and saying, well, Americans are so open-minded and we've always loved it here, and before you know it, they're kind of living next to one of the Sex Pistols in LA, and you know what I mean? And it's playing in the Viper Room and being expats, and which we don't really want to happen. But we were surprised. I mean, to be honest, I was very surprised, because I remember just journalism in America, from music journalism, response to our record 3 years ago, just seemed really kind of a bit like the English one now. It's been a real reversal. It was
really good for OK Computer as well.
It was good, yeah, but it wasn't. They seem so much more open-minded now. It's weird.
But I think the important thing is that we've been touring in this country since 1993, and we've always come and played here, and we obviously enjoy the same things that Americans enjoy in this country, you know, like obviously like bookshops and record shops and like the community and like little towns and stuff, and you know, playing the Theatre of Living Arts in Philadelphia and stuff like that. But and I think that's really important. So I don't think it's just a case of I think if people over here feel that you have got some history and you back it up and you're not like one hit, like a lot of English groups come over and they might have like a top 5 hit and then like fizzle out and stuff, and we've been coming here for like nearly 8 years, so and continue to plan to do so.
So you think there's perhaps a recognition that the band is committed to
being part of this country's culture? Yeah, completely.
Yeah, like a lot of British bands do kind of resent being here, spending time here, and don't. But we thrive in it, travelling anywhere. I mean, that's why we're recording in, you know, Denmark and France and wherever it's.
We've drawn so much of this country's musical culture for our own music.
Yeah, exactly.
So
let's come back and perhaps talk a little bit about some of that musical culture. But first of all, I'd like to play another song, and we talked about maybe listening to Idiotech.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about this song before we play it?
Yeah. The starting point for that was trying to build a drum machine out of very old style synthesizers, kind of using the same things that you know, I suppose the Roland technicians would have had in 1978 or whatever, to decide how to make something sound like a snare drum out of white noise, and how to create the sound of a bass drum, a kick drum out of filters. And so it was like we basically built a drum machine. And I played a record on top at random and had a radio playing and was just trying to generate all this chaos over this drum pattern. And then Tom cut it into sections. And ended up having a sample of the record I was playing, which is this compilation of electronic composers. They had this competition in 1972 to see who was writing the best modern electric music in a classical style. And it's been a very interesting process because I wanted to track down the composer to tell him we'd done it and ask permission and stuff. And at that point he'd been, you know, 18, 19 and was in college. Right. And no one knew what he was doing today. And it turns out he's a professor at Princeton, professor of music.
Oh my gosh, and he's probably like 50 years old. And
he's great. He came last night. We've been like corresponding, and he came and saw the show and was very excited and was, you know, describing the songs in a very interesting way. You know, it was really nice to meet him.
Wonderful.
So and he really likes what
he offered you. He said if you wanted to come for an interview to finish your music studies,
Princeton's the place.
Yeah.
He was great. So.
Well, let's listen to the song. It's Idiotech from Radiohead on Morning Becomes Eclectic. So once again, I'm Nic Harcourt, and we're talking with Jonny and Colin Greenwood of the band Radiohead. Maybe we could talk a little bit about the internet, which has grown and mutated since OK Computer, and this time around seems to have been a key component in letting the fans know what's been going on in the recording process. And prior to the album's release, there were trickles of information coming out on the web, audio snippets, video blips that teased and excited people. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what you were trying to do with that, making that available to Radiohead fans?
I don't know. It sounds very facile to say, but it's just great having direct contact with that many people without having to go through journalists and you know, present company accepted radio stations as well. You know,
thank you.
And that you know, it's obviously it's exciting, and also, I mean, personally, I enjoy the fact that it's all still quite primitive and, you know, relatively slow and low quality, and you know, we've done a few web broadcasts, and I love the you know, the nature of it. It's going to be a shame when it becomes like TV. It's nice that it's still like kind of pirate TV and pirate radio even. So, and it's something we can run ourselves, unlike a real radio station or a real TV.
Well, you know, the fan base is clearly net savvy and was rewarded when you made the whole album available for listening. It was streamed on the web a couple of weeks before it was released, and you know, interestingly enough, I was one of the chosen few who were allowed to hear the record in advance up at the Capitol Records headquarters in Hollywood.
Did you go along to that playback?
I think they had a couple of playbacks. I actually was lucky in so much as I actually went with just our web guy,
right,
because we put the blip, you know, the link through to the website up on the KCRW website. So I took our web guy so that he could get a sense of what it was all about.
Yeah.
So it was just us, and so I was saying I was one of the chosen few who were allowed to listen, and fortunately not in that big listening thing. But nevertheless, we're in a great big room, and there's like 4 of us sitting around this huge table, and they're playing the record. And it was fun to be invited to listen to it, you know, regardless of how it felt to me at the time. I sort of had to think about it later on, really, because it was a weird environment to be sitting there with somebody from the record label. Well, this is the record. Yeah. What do you think? You know,
exactly. I mean, the one negative aspect of it for us with the internet and releasing the record has been giving music journalists the chance to listen to the record. Like, ideally, we'd give everyone the record like a month before it was released for them to hear it, but because of Napster and you know, if we gave everyone a CD copy, then obviously the album would be up on the internet the next day.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, because you know, I got to hear it, as I say, a month or so before it came out, and I believe that most journalists and industry people heard it through selected listenings, or there was even like a little MP3.
Yes, that's right, Sony memory stick. You remember, like, Partridge Family, the 70s, the pen holders that you used to get with a leather thong around your neck? It's exactly the same as that.
Amazing.
And these little flexi headphones.
Right.
It's just amazing.
But the bottom line was that the label went to great lengths to control the release of the music to the reviewers and radio. And then about 10 days before it hit stores and the radio stations got their first track, somebody posted the whole album up on Napster anyway.
We'd have these ridiculous meetings when we were finishing the record about how to control the release of the music, you know. There's no way you can do it, you know.
Well, what about Napster? It didn't seem to impact your early sales on the record negatively. In fact, I think it's quite a plausible argument to make that Radiohead's exposure on Napster with bootleg recordings from European shows showing up months ago might actually have helped prepare fans to go and buy the record.
Exactly, yeah. I think you're right, you know, and we've always said that as well. When we did our first live webcast, in our studio, we had like 6 little DV cameras. Again, you go and buy it in your local digital hardware store. And then we had like a little PC server, and everyone sat around the fireplace and played one of the new songs Knives Out, on the next record. And it would be, and then I sat in the control room with Nigel watching it, and it was like seeing the first shots from the moon landing or something, in the sense of like, you were doing something that was being beamed out to like America and like Australia and South Africa, and it was just done via a little computer on a wooden desk in a little bit outside Oxford, you know. And the excitement of that, none of us could go to sleep that night. That sense of outreach to people directly, to their bedrooms and front rooms.
I mean, it was even funny in that, because we just set up originally to just play a few records, And then while the camera was pointing out, we thought we should really set up and play a song. But we didn't want to let people know that we were going to do that. You know, we hadn't even announced a DJ set. So we were all crawling around on the floor holding microphones, trying to set them up with no one seeing, and
spontaneity
getting it all ready.
Of it,
That's what's good about it.
You lose that so much.
And there was only 700 people watching, I think.
Because of the servers cost so much money, you know. But,
Right.
But, you know, and like there we were talking to people on the bulletin board, and there was this kid in San Diego who put his number up on the bulletin board, so Tom gave him a call to see how he was doing, or just to see what he thought of the song or whatever. And the guy was just so bored and unimpressed, and like wasn't surprised, you know, that Tom was calling. It wasn't like a radio for, my God, is this such and such? Am I really talking? It's like, oh yeah, hi, you know, because of the technology, because of the sort of the transparency of this medium.
Well, and I guess there's a certain intimacy that came along with that particular event anyway, so it didn't seem that unreasonable to actually be having a conversation with the singer in the band.
Because it's yet to become occluded by you know, advertising breaks between what's going on, or other people like becoming involved, you know, another layer of people like presenters and such,
producers, makeup, lighting.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to focus too much time on it, but let me just ask a little bit about Napster and the debate and the issues that it raises for artists in the industry. Talked about the fact that it certainly didn't seem to impact Radiohead at this point negatively, because the band has an established fan base, there's a big buzz, people want to buy the records. But one would imagine that there's a lot of grey areas in the Napster debate.
Yes.
Established bands can clearly benefit from it. New artists, perhaps some of them can benefit from it, but one would also think that new artists with record deals might actually be hurt by it. I mean, do you have any strong feelings either way?
I think new artists are going to get hurt most out of it because of the difficulty of collecting royalties or making you know, revenue. Not just that, but also if you're signed to a record label, you know, the difficulty of getting a record label to, you know, conduct the same kind of deal that we got in 1991-92, which was all about 5 or 6 records and long-term investment, because I think the whole industry just doesn't know what's going to happen in the long term.
Yeah.
But I think at the same time, it's freed a lot of people up, you know. We were talking earlier about artists who can like distribute and publicise their music over the internet and sell it, like, you know, as acting as mail order. You know, for all the excitement about this internet technology, I think the most successful thing it does is it acts as a very old-fashioned system of like telegrams and mail order, and like the Sears robot catalogue in the 40s. You know, you can send off for something and get it back. You know, it's obviously what companies like Amazon are using like the internet for.
Yeah, but the only trouble is that you've got to remember that our first few tours and our first couple of records were funded by, you know, Queen having sold albums in you know, in the late 80s or whatever.
You mean because...
So I don't know.
Because of the record companies,
the record label
being
had
able
the money
to sell back catalogue.
Yeah,
Right.
And we couldn't have toured in America, for example. They were subsidising that. We wouldn't have been able to, you know, use studios and things. So that's all kind of weird.
It is strange, because you get the feeling, the great fear is that you feel that the actual... The physicality of what you do is disappearing, you know. You felt it when music went from 12-inch vinyl to CD, you know, and record companies made an absolute fortune in the 80s when they went to CD. But by doing so, they let the horse out of the stable, you know, because they instantly made the digital format, and you can't go backwards from that. And they made so much money by selling everyone the Doors again.
By remastering and re-releasing it and selling it for twice
exactly.
the amount of money.
So, you know, it's their own fault. But
do you see Radiohead's future embracing the technology more as the technology advances, and do you see a time when maybe Radiohead will distribute its music through the internet?
I don't know. One concern is that as soon as bands start doing that, it's like setting up your own label. You end up spending all your time in business meetings, I would expect. So
it doesn't sound like an attractive idea.
Want to do.
I think it sounds like a brilliant idea. I think that's what's going to happen. I think, you know, if you look at the major labels at the moment, there are loads of rumours flying around how they're desperately running around trying to sell off the whole pressing and manufacturing sides of their businesses, you know, because that's not going to, in the future, that's all going to go, you know. The business now, the money is to be made is into the systems that the music's being played on. So people like Sony, I think, sort of the rumours of people, big record company trying to get rid of the record company side of it and concentrate on the dinky little device you can hang around your neck like a 70s pen holder,
right,
and listen to music you get off your computer or whatever. So
let's talk a little bit about touring. You did a fairly substantial European jaunt this year, played new songs before the record was released. There's just a couple of dates here in the States, this side of the end of the year anyway.
Exactly.
But I believe we can expect to see a fuller tour, possibly a month or so of dates next April or May, and it's two questions in one, really. I also believe that we're going to hear another record around the same time.
Part of the process of recording this record meant that it took us so long to get our heads together and to get into a position where we were enjoying ourselves that it was quite hard to stop. And we seemed to just record song after song and had far too many for one record, and have to do something with them. We're still not sure how we're going to release them or what order we're going to put them in or how long the record's going to be, but we certainly had too much for one record.
So you didn't want to do a double album because...
We thought about it, but there's sort of, I don't know.
Double albums don't work.
I don't think so.
No,
There's an arrogance in them. There's a sort of,
right.
Bands get to the stage where they think their music is worth,
right,
3 hours of your time, and it's not.
But clearly the songs are important, and
yeah.
You feel that they're worthy of another album's worth of material. So
yeah, I think that's true.
And is the other work a little more song structured than?
No, it's not. People have been saying that because of the songs that we're playing live from that new record.
Because you're playing some of those songs now.
Yeah, and obviously we're going to be playing the more song-orientated ones. But it's a similar mixture, I think.
The important thing is this blue tent we took across Europe.
I wanted to ask you about that. You did the tent tour.
Yeah.
The Big Top tour.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
It's just the only solution we could think of to not be playing in sports halls and be still dealing with the British climate, And a tent is the only answer, really. And so we carried this enormous 10,000 people tent around. It takes 2 days to build. It's one of those, And it really worked as a venue. It sounded much better. I think people could see better.
We can control the sound in an environment like that, which you can't do in a lot of halls, arenas in particular.
Yeah.
Might that be a part of any tour in the States?
Well,
or is that
if you were to talk to me
that...
personally, I mean, it's my dream that we would do something like that in the States, right. And it would be amazing because I think in America, what we were interested in America is the whole approach of groups like Fish and Grateful Dead when they started and stuff like that. Being able to you can do that in America if you have a popularity that's outside of the level of corporate sponsorship and the post-show radio tie-in hospitality tent and the major beer commercial, tent stuff, but you can because America's so big, you can do that. You can and like having local artists play and conduct a sort of small version of a festival. So we're looking into that at the moment.
It seems that Radiohead's a band that wants to challenge itself, wants to challenge the audience with the records and with the way that you present the stuff live. So hopefully we'll see you here next year. Let's finish up with one more song. We're going to play one more song, which is Motion Picture Soundtrack. Can you just give me a quick intro into the track?
Yeah, again, very old song, more than 10 years old as a musical idea. It's played on a very old harmonium pedal organ, on top of which we put some double basses and harp to try and sound like Alice Coltrane, John Coltrane's wife. We've played lots of sitar-based, kind of, ground bass, repetitive, Indian-influenced jazz.
Let me ask you a quick question. Where does that stuff come from? Where do those influences for you come from? I mean, clearly you've heard the records, but what makes you want to bring those sounds, those samples, that sensibility to this music?
I mean, friends, relationships, like our sister brother-in-law, he's got a huge record. But I mean, to get record shops in America, going to one of your little clubs and stuff, and harder and harder to do now. But
so do you go record shopping when you're in a little town somewhere and pick up that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, I like Motion Picture Soundtrack because this journalist said it's like Wizard of Oz. It's at the end of this mad record with all these mad sounds. Steve Lamacq from Radio 1, he said, you get the curtains pulled back and there's There's this bloke like pumping. You can hear the wheezing, grinding of
Right.
this guy pedaling to playing the keyboard. It's a harmonium from West Virginia from like the 1850s that is actually on our first album, Pablo Honey, on a track called Thinking About You. And the studio closed down and the guy wanted to sell us the equipment, which is like a sort of passing on of this stuff. So I love the idea that it's on like our fourth and first record, and also like the Wizard of Oz, and you see like after all the technology and the Pro Tools and the samplers,
There's
the end of the day.
at the end of the
it.
day, it's just
Interesting.
like,
Well, that seems like a perfect place to end the interview, really, and to play motion picture soundtrack. Thank you so much, Jonny and Colin Greenwood, for joining us.
Thanks, Nick.
Good luck with the record. Hopefully
you.
we'll see you back here next year, and thanks so much for joining us on Morning Becomes Eclectic.
Great, thank you.
Sleeping pills help me get back to your arms. Cheap sex and sad films help me get where I belong. I think you're crazy, maybe. I think you're crazy, maybe. Stop.